Natalie Sideserf here, Sideserf Cake Studio, and I'm gonna show you how I made Dino Cake Nuggets. There are a ton of different ways to create a fried chicken effect with cake, but I found one that is incredibly simple and incredibly realistic. So I'm gonna show you how. If you like this video and you like Dino Cake Nuggets, we put out a new cake every Monday, so subscribe to our channel. We also have Patreon, where you can kind of hang out and see what we're up to behind the scenes. That's at patreon.com/sidesurfcakes. Let's get started. I started out with some leftover cake that I have from a previous sculpted cake, and I'm just crumbling that up with my fingers. You just want to make sure that all the cake is broken up and the crumbs pretty fine. Next, you're going to add a little bit of buttercream at a time. We're going to always have different amounts of crumbs because we have different amounts of scraps. So you really want to pay more attention to the consistency rather than the amounts. So you add a little bit at a time until it has this kind of fine crumb, but it still packs a little bit. Next, I want to make sure that I have the correct color when I color my cake. So I'm going to use a few tablespoons of water, and I'm going to add ivory gel food color, just a few drops at a time, until it's a nice dark color. Now, if I just put the gel right into the cake crumbs, it would get really tacky and it wouldn't mix well. So you just add a little bit of water to that gel food color, and it will mix really well. So I'm testing it out on a small amount first to make sure that my colors match. And you can see here they match pretty well. I'm happy with that. So we're gonna move on. Now this is only half of the cake crumbs. I put the other half in a separate bowl. And we're going to add the rest of that food color to the bowl. Once these cake crumbs are nice and mixed, we're gonna set it aside, and we're going to take the other half of cake crumbs. We're gonna add a little bit more buttercream at a time until we make a nice cake dough. By cake dough, I mean that this cake is going to pack really well. So I can ball it up and it keeps its shape. Much different than the crumbs from earlier. So my other half is nice and crumbly, and this half is more like a dough. We're going to put it on a piece of parchment and roll it out with a rolling pin. This kind of rolls like sugar cookie dough. So if it starts to break apart, you get any creases, you can patch it up with your fingers. It's really easy to roll out. Now this is nice and soft, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this in the fridge and start working on my Dinosaur stencils. So just with some parchment paper, I took the two different shaped nuggets and I traced around them, and then I cut them out. This is a great way to quickly cut out these shapes. If you have dinosaur cookie cutters, you could definitely use those as well, but I don't, so I'm using the actual nuggets as my stencil. Now you place the stencil directly on the cooled cake dough, and then I just took a blade and I cut around each of the stencils. So I'm going to cut out 4 of each dinosaur. So you kind of want to place them on the dough so that you can fit as many as possible. You don't want to just line them up. Try to kind of piece them together like a puzzle so you can get as many out of it as possible. Now this dough is back to being warm, so I'm going to pop it in the fridge. And once it's in the fridge, you can see it peels away much easier. It's not too soft. So now I can take apart the cake dough and see each individual dinosaur. So you can take that extra cake dough that's left over and make more with it. I went around each of the dinosaurs and I softened the edges. I noticed that the Dino Nuggets weren't super sharp. They had these round shapes, so I copied that. Again, this cake dough is nice and cool, so you just kind of press on it and it still keeps its shape. If you're having a hard time doing this, or you pick it up and it starts to kind of fall apart, that is because your cake dough is too soft. You got to put it back in the fridge. Next, I brush some buttercream directly on the dinosaur. And I go back and I grab that cake dough that I made, the first half. So it's gonna be that crumbly cake dough. This has that texture that I want to look like the dinosaur nugget breading. This crumbled up cake dough is going to stick to that buttercream really easily. Now again, these are cooled dinosaurs, so they have been refrigerated, so they're keeping their shape. So when I place all of that crumbled up cake dough on it, I can pick it up and kind of brush some of it away, and it'll still keep the dinosaur shape. I took a tool and I kind of poked at it and added a little bit more texture if I saw some areas that were maybe lacking a little. Then I set that dino aside, and I do it again for all of the dinosaurs. So if you don't want to use buttercream, you could definitely use a thin layer of chocolate. I know cake balls are typically coated in chocolate, so if you had some white chocolate, you could paint the white chocolate directly on the dinosaurs and then put that cake crumb over top of them, and it's going to stick just as easily. So you pick up the dinosaur, you kind of shape it again, brush off any of the loose cake crumbs, and you're left with a Dino Nugget. Well, a cake Dino Nugget, that is. How easy is that? So I'm using cake dough in both cases, but I'm using two different textured cake doughs. So the first textured cake dough is going to have that crumbly texture, and the only thing that's different is that I'm adding less buttercream to that. So the less buttercream gives you a crumbled texture, and when you add more buttercream, you get a nice dense texture. So the entire nugget is cake dough, which is cake balls, which is absolutely delicious. So I wanted to add a sauce that goes over top of the dinosaurs. So I took some jam, and with a whisk I added a little bit of water, and then I colored it. So I added some red food color, a little bit of orange food color, and it's gonna create kind of like a hot sauce that I'm gonna drizzle over top. Now I'm going to place my chilled Dino Nuggets, cake Dino Nuggets, in a little boat because I think that looks adorable. And then I'm going to drizzle my two sauces over top. You could use any sauce over top of these Dino Nuggets that you want. So I'm using a strawberry jam. I'm also going to use a yellow buttercream that looks a lot like a honey mustard. And there you have it, a super simple way to create these cute looking chicken nuggets that are actually cake.